Everyone tells us to be authentic. We know it's important, but how do we do it? And how do we do it in a way that's professional and effective? Public speaking is a skill, not a talent. It's not something any of us have to be born with. It's something every single one of us learns with practice and feedback.
My biggest audience ever was 34,612 people, and I was performing, not speaking. I was singing the national anthem for the Boston Red Sox at Fenway Park, which was amazing, one of the most amazing moments of my life.
So, Allison, you've been leading the charge really for better communication across Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, government agencies, serving as faculty at the Harvard Kennedy School down the road from me. And so you know a lot about kind of speaking, connecting with people, communicating, and I'm really excited to share your insights with our folks who are viewing this in the education and association world.
Well, thanks for inviting me to be here, Kyle. By training, I'm an opera singer, and for the past 20 years, I've been teaching public speaking and leadership communication, going beyond just standing on stage in front of an audience to help people speak with impact in meetings, pitches, and presentations. I define public speaking very broadly. It's anytime you speak with one person or more. And that is critical, especially in the association world, because you're communicating with members and with colleagues and helping members communicate more effectively in their organizations. So it's something that I have lived and breathed both as a keynote speaker and as the founder and CEO of a training firm dedicated to this topic.
That is awesome. So let's talk about influence and authority, okay? You have both, right? You're one of the top sort of experts in public speaking around the world. And, you know, kind of on the flip side, you've also mentioned and written about influencing without authority. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Influencing without authority is actually the most frequently requested topic that my team and I receive when people reach out for training or continuing education, because so often part of our success comes from influencing others to do something when we can't just say, because I told you, or because I'm the boss, especially in an association world where you're trying to convince members to get more involved or to bring these tools to their organizations. Influencing without authority recognizes that we first and foremost have to build trust with someone before we can ask them to do something or seek to influence them. And then when we do seek to influence them, it's actually a negotiation as well. So the idea of influencing without authority brings together concepts of trust building, persuasion and influence, and negotiation as well. And it's this delicate balance that really depends on who you are and who the people are you're seeking to influence. And it's not something that's easy that we can do with a click of a button. Although everyone's trying to find those AI tools that will help you do it for you, it's probably best that we don't have that power at our fingertips because of the potential for misuse. But it is one of the most important topics any of us working within and among organizations can develop in order to be more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where I saw you were writing about influencing up, influencing sort of, you know, vertically, horizontally. And so we have viewers and readers who are managing staff. Sometimes they're being managed. They're managing, you know, some are CEOs, others directors. You know, at any level, especially with associations, you're almost always trying to sort of influence and manage membership, who it's sort of a reverse pyramid at times, where the membership tend to be the ones that we serve ultimately, as well as you know, board, other staff, both up and down. You know, how can some of those principles improve alignment to deliver, you know, value at those various levels, you know, engaging sort of individual contributors, members, and staff as kind of the end goals?
Right. It's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and I call on my own background as the volunteer president of my alumni association from the Harvard Kennedy School. So I spent 2 years as president of the Washington, D.C. Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Council. And that was an exercise in influencing without authority, because I had to engage volunteers to be part of the council, not just to give us suggestions and then ask us to implement, but to be able to bring them into the implementation and deal with a lot of very opinionated people who thought they knew better than us how to run the council. So I learned a lot about influencing without authority. And what I've realized during that process is that when we want to influence someone, it's a process of building trust first. We can't just reach out and say, hey, I need something, if we haven't taken time to build that relationship, to provide something of value first. In negotiation, we talk about tradables. In a negotiation, tradables are things that I can give you that are easy for me to give up, but of high value to you. So if you have a child who plays soccer, it's easy for me to say on a Monday morning, how was your child's soccer game? And it's of high value to you. So as we think about influencing without authority, what tradables do we have so that we can provide value or benefit to others before we seek to influence them, before we ask them for something? And that takes time and intention and patience and strategy. So a lot of people are looking for that quick cure. I need something done. What do I do? How do I persuade them? Well, the time to think about that was much further behind than right now. So how do we see that into our way of operating as professionals so that we're always building trust? And when we do need to ask people to do something or seek to influence them, they're already inclined to listen to us because we've taken the time to build trust with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the core tenets of our sort of work as an internal team, as well as partners and folks like you, is shifting mindsets from relationships with people often being transactional, especially at scale, trying to manage thousands of members and things like that. It's easy for people to think of hey, I need this from you, I can do this for you, versus shifting it from transactional into more kind of transformational and coming from a place of empathy as to, hey, what does this person really need, and how can I help them first? And I think that builds a lot of trust, and having that kind of mutual connection, knowing, for example, hey, my son is gonna be playing soccer tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's awesome. And so there's a lot of really progressive organizations that we work with, where it's easy, especially if you've been around close to 100 years, sometimes just to kind of slide into maintenance mode. But a lot of the folks we work with are not, are really going beyond putting out the fires whenever communication may break down. And I'd love to hear from you. How can these types of organizations, first be kind of proactive in keeping on top of some of the leading indicators of effective communication, internally and externally, and then second, sort of adapt and respond when needed as industries shift and people inevitably shift in the end?
One of the biggest challenges I see organizations face in their communication skills is when they're not communicating with the right people. So we tend to have our go-to people who we speak to, we ask for guidance, and then our worldview is limited by the individuals who are part of that kitchen cabinet, so to speak. And so the challenge becomes opening up that space so that there are so many different people from different levels of the organization that you're communicating with, so that you can really get the pulse of what's on people's minds, what's not working. It goes beyond polling members, although that could be one part of it. It's looking for the allies within your target audience who really care about your mission and are willing to give you honest feedback before you communicate a message. So I'm part of a number of different associations. I've seen those associations get into trouble when they rolled out a brand new policy that they only tested among the board. Nobody asked the general membership what they thought about it. And there was such an uproar that that organization had to roll back something that they had invested a lot of time and resources into, because they didn't build the trust of those individuals whom they represent, and they didn't invite enough people into the consultative process before making a decision. And yes, I understand many times with associations and organizations, it's too much of a consultative committee-based process. At the same time, we still need to figure out who are our key stakeholders and how do we make sure their views, their preferences are represented in our decision-making process.
Yeah, I've heard of related concept recently of the sort of velocity of information flow within an organization, and being able to actually measure and audit a little bit how quickly does key information get to the right person within an organization. Let's say there's one person who's running a new initiative to grow or launch a new sort of feature of membership or new benefit, this kind of thing. How quickly does information flow within the team and kind of from membership, or as things come up on the ground to that person? And it's not an easy thing, but I think it makes the difference between being able to innovate and do new things quickly and effectively, and have people actually know what's going on versus just kind of coming out and saying, hey, here's a new thing.
That's such an important point, because and this is where my background as a speaker comes into play, because as a speaker, I'm taking my audience on a journey, which means I'm always cognizant of where they are and where I want them to go. That's what we do as speakers. As a leader, as a manager, as an executive within an association, it's the same thing with my members. Where are they and where do I want them to go? And it's thinking strategically in advance to how your message is going to be received given where they are. And case in point is this year, the associations that I'm a member of have increased the fees of membership, and they've also increased the fees of their conferences by a significant amount, with zero flagging for the members. As in, I didn't find out until I went to renew my membership, and all of a sudden it's hundreds of dollars more. I go to register for a conference and it's double what I would have expected it to be. And the only place it's being addressed is on the private Facebook group of the association. And it leads to a lack of trust on my part, because the association didn't think about where are people, how are they doing in this financial environment, in this economic climate, and how will my decision be received by them? What do I need to do in order to make sure we pace the information, we pace the communication in order to bring people along with us, instead of just hitting us over the head on an already difficult year?
Are there any other things that when you work with organizations, either membership groups or other types of groups, where you come in and you're often needing to kind of educate leaders because you see these common mistakes within organizations? Anything to sort of flag for folks to watch out for?
A common mistake I see organizations face, whether it's private, public, nonprofit sectors, is not recognizing that there are different kinds of communication styles. So I know from my work in corporate America during the pandemic, the office dress code has changed in corporate America as a result of the pandemic. I also see, and I wrote an article about that in Harvard Business Review about how our styles are changing in terms of attire. Our communication styles are also changing in that people are bringing more of an authentic voice to the office. And we're recognizing that authenticity takes different forms. It can take the form of language that resonates with you. It can also take the form of different communication styles. So one of the areas our company is researching right now is neurodivergent communication styles as a way of making sure that managers understand not everyone communicates in the same way, and the dominant way of communicating that you're used to doesn't work for everyone and doesn't make everyone feel included. And that's a significant challenge for an organization where it may want to have its own one unique communication style and practice, but not everyone fits that style. So how are we welcoming of other people's communication styles while also sharing with others what we need when someone communicates with us as well? So how are we being flexible and inclusive of other people's styles, preferences, and needs?
Wow, yeah, that's cool. That's and definitely a moving target in a lot of ways too. But there's some foundational things. Neurodivergent communication is something I need to look at after this. I'm curious. Anything else that you'd want to share in terms of considerations for organizations from your own work, and then I'll shift a little more into sort of the ground level questions related to certifications, sort of education courses, things like that.
I would say communication skills are historically hard to measure because they're so subjective. So what you think of as effective communication skills might not be what others find effective. And the use of story, the concept of brevity and clarity. Every organization tends to have its own culture and what it values and doesn't value. And so setting targets of how do we measure communication can be really challenging. In our workshops, my company will use pre and post program surveys where people self-assess based on their perceived confidence in a series of areas where we know we're providing skills and strategies. With an organization, looking at what the outcome of better communication skills is intended to achieve can be helpful in terms of our member satisfaction scores improving? Do our members feel considered and consulted before major decisions? Those kinds of surveys can be helpful. And then looking at how exactly do we measure our communication skills, recognizing there's no one size fits all, and everyone applies it in different ways. So with our training, we say, we give you all the skills you need to be successful. It's up to you to use them. So an association trying to improve its communication skills needs to know that we can provide these opportunities for everyone to learn and grow. Then it's up to the individual leaders, individual contributors to put them into practice.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's as diverse as the opinions about what good communication is and how to do it, and the different sort of doctrines related to it, from story brand to smart brevity and all these different sort of opinions and books out there. I've read a lot of them myself, and it's very kind of fun to watch how different people think so differently about it. And a lot of, I think, communication and just connection with people comes back to the core psychology and actually just caring about other people.
Right.
So much could come out of that sort of basic human needs and the desire to connect and feel some sense of belonging. So I'll shift into some specifics. So professional landscapes are shifting, faster and faster every day. Many different, almost every single industry, there's an unprecedented need now for continuing education, and along with that, certifications in the right sort of areas. You yourself are a certified public speaking professional, and you're members of various organizations. How do you see the role and impacts of certifications and that sort of the seal of expertise, particularly in professional development, and share any stories how it's sort of had an impact in your own career as well? I'm curious.
Certifications are critical in every industry. For me, particularly as a speaking professional, as a certified speaking professional, anyone in this field can declare themselves a speaker. They can say, okay, here's my fee. And if someone's willing to pay them, all of a sudden this person is a professional speaker. That doesn't mean that they're a good speaker or an effective speaker or an ethical speaker. And that's where certification comes in, because through this process that I went through the National Speakers Association, it is a rigorous process, as many certification programs are, that demonstrates hundreds of consistently paid speeches and demonstrated client satisfaction as well, and a host of other tools that are taken into consideration before awarding this certification. So it's incredibly important in my field to demonstrate who has longevity, who's really dedicated themselves and has objective achievements that can determine their success, or that can demonstrate their success, which then makes it easier for an association to say, okay, everyone's calling me about the next annual conference. They all want to be a speaker. How do I know that someone's really been vetted and tested beyond the testimonials that they've put on their website? So that's why it's important in terms of the speaking profession. In other professions, we also see that just because you got the initial certificate doesn't mean that you have the expertise over time. Just because you got your law degree or your public health degree doesn't mean that you're still at the top of your game. And that's where continuing education is so important, because it shows you're continuing to invest in your skills, as opposed to just using the 20-year-old techniques that you learned 20 years ago. You're really dedicated yourself to continuing to improve. And my company recently became NASPA certified to offer CPE credits. So we learned a lot about what that process is like. It was an incredibly thorough process of certification and then renewal and updating of that certification that helps us ensure that what we're teaching people is going to be recognized and help them to continue to stay sharp and demonstrate expertise. So it's critical, again, especially now that not just anyone can say that they're an expert, anyone can go on to a generative AI, use a learning language model like ChatGPT to learn something, and then all of a sudden declare themselves an expert. As you and I know, it doesn't work that way, but you can probably convince some unsuspecting people. So it makes certifications even more important as an objective and trusted authority.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And it's recently I've seen from several people, there's this sense, specifically when you become a public speaker, there's sometimes this sense of being an imposter syndrome, right? You're being invited as an expert in this thing that, maybe especially early on, you don't actually know that much about. And your initial research before your talk is sort of making you the expert in the room with something new to share. But there's a certain level where even if as you're starting out, getting some certification like this can add a lot of credibility when you might not otherwise have it. I'm curious to go back a little bit and hear any sort of interesting stories. Sometimes for our folks, it's hard to be able to really sell that certification to folks and show the value and get folks interested in making the leap with your own personal sort of career growth. Leading up to that point when you decided, I want to become certified, any stories or what got you interested in actually making that jump?
Within the National Speakers Association, it is very highly prized to achieve that designation. And this is something that I think more associations can utilize to build up the interest in those certifications, is at every monthly in-person meeting of at least the DC chapter of the National Speakers Association, they ask all the certified professionals to stand up and give them a round of applause. And who recently achieved that designation, stand up, get a round of applause. It is celebrated and welcomed. So it brings the admiration of our peers. It brings recognition among our peers. That the primary reason for me to get my CSP designation was because there are specific conversations within NSA that are reserved only for people with CSPs. So there's a summit every year that is limited to CSPs. And there was so much knowledge being discussed in that room. And I'm the type of person who does not like being excluded from any room. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that feeling. And so for me, it was saying those individuals in that room have a lot of knowledge and experience. I want access to that room. And I'm going to go through this process in order to get into that room so that I can learn and I can also share. And at the same time, I'm sharpening my skills. I'm continuing to become a better speaker. And I'm also able to provide more value to my clients because of what I learn from others. So I wouldn't discount the peer sharing, the peer collaboration component that comes when everyone in the room has achieved that designation, and now they can help each other.
Yeah, I love that. There's this prestige, and for anybody that's seen or listened to the songs of Hamilton, it's like Aaron Burr wanting to be in the room where it happens. And in terms of content, so there's folks developing educational content, explosion of online content, and more and more variety in terms of formats. What are some of the critical points that folks should be considering and even communicating to faculty and such with a highly sort of digital audience now, online classes and online events, different sorts of formats like that?
It's really important to keep in mind a few different factors. First, authenticity absolutely translates across a camera lens. We all think that it doesn't, that our energy falls flat. It's easy for the energy to fall flat because if you're an extrovert like me, you get energy from the audience. And when you're presenting to a virtual audience, especially when you don't have the gallery of faces, you have to create that energy and then share it through a camera lens. And I would say during the pandemic, that's what my team and I were doing on a daily basis, was tell people, look into the camera lens, pause and breathe, and here are some techniques to help your authenticity come out over on camera. So that's one element to keep in mind. It takes more effort, but you can do it. It's also important, even more in a virtual setting, to focus on clarity, because your audience, their eyes are immediately being bombarded with distractions. They have messages come up. They think, oh, I'll just check email for a second, and then they get distracted. And so there are so many more elements that we need to be aware of when we're presenting virtually, because we don't have those verbal or visual cues from the audience, and they're being bombarded by so many distractions. And then another important component to keep in mind is how fatigued people are becoming on camera. So what we did during the pandemic is we made every meeting a video meeting, even if it would have been a phone call, and people get really tired being on camera and interacting. And all of our workshops are interactive. We're going to cold call volunteers. We're going to have them put things in the chat. We're going to have them practice out loud. And it's important to determine how your audience wants to receive information. Right now, I always ask if something's going to be recorded because I don't want to sit in front of a computer and look at a camera lens. I want to be folding laundry while I'm learning about advances in AI so that I can keep my hands busy and just listen and free my mind to listen. So it's recognizing we need to understand what's the purpose of what we're communicating. Does it have to be synchronous? Or can it be asynchronous? And how interactive do we want it to be? It depends. Is it skill building or knowledge building? And what kind of polls are you going to do throughout so that they're value added polls? They're not just, we're going to do a poll because we need the CPE credits. Let's just create an easy poll. No, let's make the poll value add so that we really are testing for comprehension instead of just teaching the test.
That's awesome.
And I'll mention one other thing, by the way, that relates to the book that is behind me. Speak with Impact is a handbook for the busy professional using their voice as they move up in their organizations. I recently released a digital e-guide called Speak with Impact Virtually that helps you apply everything from the book in a virtual or hybrid setting. And there are a lot of strategies in there for online classes and virtual engagement.
Yeah, that's great. And it relates to my next question too. And I'm thinking maybe I should have asked this in the beginning so we could have done these exercises together before we started. So any tools or books or other resources you'd suggest folks take out that or check out that want to learn more, and how can they learn more about your own work as well?
I'd be happy to share anything with people who have questions about public speaking, communication overall. I'm spending a lot of time researching AI authenticity and the future of human connection, which is actually the title of a new keynote I'm rolling out. And I'd be happy to talk about how do new technological advances make us even more authentic, and what are the ethical considerations that we need to be prepared for in terms of the future of human connection. So my book Speak with Impact is a very helpful resource for writing, practicing, and delivering a speech or presentation. The e-guide Speak with Impact Virtually is also available to help you apply everything from the book online. And then I would be happy to answer any questions people have. We have a newsletter on LinkedIn, and then a newsletter that I write that's going out soon that is all about strategic tips we can use to be better speakers, either within an organization or individually. And I would encourage people to reach out to me on LinkedIn, connect with me there, and I post regularly on these topics, and I'm always happy to be a resource.
Love it. Yeah, appreciate that. Hey, thank you for joining and watching so far. I'd love to hear from you. Quick question. What do you think sets the best association leaders apart? That's what we'd like to learn. We're all about shared knowledge. So come join us, subscribe to the Continuing Education Journal, and we'd love to learn together.